This beef and onion stew is extremely easy to make, it's cheap, tastes fantastic, and the garlic mash that goes with it is the perfect partner. Let's get straight into it. First things first, we're going to need 3 large brown or yellow onions. These are just going to be peeled, leaving the root intact. Then we're going to slice them in half again, then in half again, cutting them into 8 even-sized pieces. You can also just cut them into large chunks, it's completely up to you. Going with the onions is 2 ribs of celery. These can just be thinly sliced, and if you're like me, I personally don't like celery as an individual ingredient, but in dishes like this, it adds great flavour. This right here is 250 grams worth of Swiss brown mushrooms. They are also known as cremini or baby portobellos, and these can just be thinly sliced or sliced into quarters like what I'm doing here. We are also going to need 5 large cloves of freshly peeled garlic. All we have to do with these is thinly slice them, which is going to only lightly activate the allicin compound, which is what gives garlic its flavour, and this is just going to create a nice subtle flavour within our sauce. The last ingredient for the base of the sauce is 10 grams of fresh thyme. This can be given a rough chop, doesn't have to be super fine and it doesn't have to be perfect, and if it has woody stems, I do recommend picking off the leaves. It is also optional if you don't want to use it, but it does add a nice herbal freshness and aroma. Now the meat or protein for this, I'm using 1 kilo of beef Bolar blade. You can use chuck roast or chuck steak if you wanted to for this. We're also going to season it up with a bit of sea salt flakes and 25 grams of plain flour, which is going to coat this, help create a crust and help thicken the sauce. Then with that in, just give this a quick mix just until everything is lightly coated. With that all done, place a large high-rimmed pan or pot over high heat, then add in 2 tablespoons or 40 milliliters of olive oil, and then add in the beef, doing this in batches, and sear this for about 3 minutes on each side just until you have a nice golden brown crust. Then we can remove this from the pan and place this into a bowl to rest, repeating with the other batch just until everything is evenly browned all over. With that done, add in 1 tablespoon of olive oil, then reduce the heat to medium-high, add in the onions, celery and mushrooms, along with a big pinch of sea salt flakes. Then whilst mixing around regularly, saute for 5 minutes. This is going to release a lot of the moisture in the mushrooms. The onions are going to get a really nice caramelization color on them, and it's going to deglaze the pan, bringing up any flavors. Next, add in the garlic, then we're going to add in 150 milliliters of red wine. If you can't consume alcohol, use beef stock at this stage, and mix and combine for about 2 minutes, bringing that wine to a boil, and this is going to deglaze everything properly, bringing up every single bit that's stuck on the bottom of the pan. Let's then add the beef and any resting juices back into the pot, along with 650 milliliters of beef stock. This is going to be the base and depth of our sauce, and the thyme if you're using it to add that nice herby freshness. Give this all another really good mix through, making sure everything is evenly combined and that beef is completely submerged in the liquid. Then we're going to allow this to come to a boil. You can also season to taste at this time with sea salt flakes and cracked black pepper. 20 cracks worth. In the meantime, whilst we wait for that to come to a boil, we're going to run 5 large cloves of garlic along a fine microplane or any fine side box grater or garlic press if you have one, just to create a paste. And we're also going to need 1 kilo of any high starch potatoes. Please use high starch, it creates a nice soft and fluffy mash. Otherwise, if you use a waxy one, it kind of has a glue texture. These can then be peeled, which will create a really smooth mash. I know some people don't peel them, but that's completely up to you. And if you do have any leftover peels, don't use these for a stock, they will cloud it, but you can make really crispy potato skins, which I'll leave a link for in the description. Now once peeled, add the potatoes to a large pot, then make your way over to a sink and fill this up with cold water, just about 1 inch above the potatoes. We don't want to fill it up anymore because it is just a waste of water. Going back to the stew, this is now coming to a boil so we can place on a lid and cook this for 1.5 hours over a low heat, and I am moving it out of the way just so I can put the potatoes over a high heat and then bring them to a boil. Once they are at a boil, just cook them for 22 to 23 minutes just until you can poke a fork in them and they're nice and soft. Then carefully remove them from the stovetop and gently pour them through a sieve or colander. It doesn't really matter if they are completely broken up, but obviously I like to pour them a little bit closer just so it makes it safer and then you don't burn yourself. And we're just going to allow these to cool for about 15 minutes. Now the garlic butter for the mash is super easy to make. Place a pan over medium-high heat, add in 150 grams of unsalted butter and allow it to melt and start foaming. Then add in the minced garlic and then just cook this for about 3 minutes, mixing it regularly, and break up that garlic so that it allows it to crisp and become nice and golden. This is going to create a beautiful beurre noisette, which is just brown butter in French. But once that's done, this can then be removed from the stovetop. Lots of people mash their potatoes different ways, so I like to use a potato ricer, which is obviously this contraption I have here. All you have to do is put the potatoes in and then just press it down to create little potato noodles. But some people do it in a blender, you can use a fork, or if you just have a regular handheld potato masher, it's completely fine, just as long as it's nice and smooth. If you do happen to do this in a blender, you can obviously just completely skip this step and then add all of these ingredients here, which is 150 milliliters of full fat milk, which I've lightly warmed. You can either do it in a pan or in a microwave. And then we're just going to pour in that garlic butter, but we're going to save the crispy bits for later on, as well as a tiny little bit of that butter as well. This is going to be used as a garnish, which is the perfect topping. Hit it up with some sea salt flakes to taste, and I'm actually using ground white pepper here instead of cracked black pepper. I just don't like the chunky bits in the mash, and I want this to be extremely smooth. Once that's all in, give this a really good mix through with a spatula or a fork or whatever you have, just until everything is extremely smooth, and you can go that extra mile and run it for a sieve, which will take out any potential lumps if there is any at all. Going back to the stew, let's then carefully remove the lid, and I'm going to add in some carrots here. I'm just being stupid by sliding in one, but obviously I'm going to dump in the whole lot, which is one bunch of baby carrots that have been washed, but I've left the peels on, and then I'm going to push them down, making sure that they're submerged in the liquid, and continue cooking this for about 30 minutes, just until those carrots are nice and al dente and the sauce is really thick. Once all that's done, the meat will be super soft, the carrots are al dente, and that sauce is nicely thickened. This can then be removed from the stovetop. As for serving, you can put this on plates and bowls or whatever you have, whatever's easiest for you. I'm going to put down the mash first, spreading it out to create a nice bed, then go over the top with that garlic butter and of course the crispy garlic to create a nice little topping. Place over the stew, obviously getting a nice helping of the meat as well as the vegetables, and of course place down the carrots, which I used about 2 to 3 per portion. This does serve 4 people, so there's plenty to go around, and also be sure to spoon over any sauce that's left over. I'm also garnishing this with some thyme to add a bit of freshness and colour, but what we're then left with is this extremely warming and comforting beef stew with that amazing garlic mash and the soft al dente carrots. The only thing that's then left to do is make all of this worthwhile, and we can then dig in.
I think this dish speaks for itself. It is absolutely incredible. There's so much flavour going on from something so simple as well. The meat is literally melt in your mouth tender. That mash is silky smooth, and the garlic that goes on the mash adds the perfect texture. Also, those carrots are delicious as well. Obviously, they're cooked in the sauce, but overall, this is an incredible dish, and I really hope you try it.